Student Success, Built by Design, expanding the human potential for today's students. Welcome to Student Success, Built by Design. In this podcast, we explore the fundamental question of how the built environment impacts student success. We will showcase specific design and build achievements of the San Diego Community College District's $3.5 billion bond measure HH, whose goal is to further our education and student success mission by designing and constructing learning environments that don't simply host students, but elevate them, academically, personally, and socially. Therefore, we design with a clear purpose and build with mission. Welcome back to our podcast on student success, built by design. Today, we're discussing self-esteem needs. We'll be diving deeper into the student success that we discussed in our third episode. We'll be engaging our panel on the fourth layer of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, psychological needs of confidence, mastery, and recognition through academic, artistic, and athletic endeavors. We'll explore the design, construction, and management of the built environment and how it can impact the student experience and their success. So we want to welcome back our panel again, Dr. Joel Peterson, San Diego Community College District Vice Chancellor and Executive Operations Officer, Aurora Ayala, San Diego Community College District Associate Vice Chancellor for Facilities, Risk Management, and Operations, Jennifer Gibb, Van Pelt Construction Services Vice President, Business Development, Andrea Stalker, PBK Architects, Principal and Director of Higher Education, and myself, Jeff Johnson, PBK Architects Principal and Director of Design and Educational Planning. So today, I wanted to talk a little bit more about some of the highlights that we had from previous episodes, defining student success. We discussed personal, social, and professional aspects of each student, and we started to break down Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So episode 3, last time, we were talking about social needs, which is the first part of psychological needs. Talked about love, connectivity, and belonging. So today, we're going to be talking about self-esteem needs, confidence, mastery, and recognition. So to kick off things, I was hoping, Dr. Peterson, you could talk a little bit more, breaking down Maslow's psychological and self-esteem needs, what they are, and how it relates to some of our previous discussion on student success.
Well, thank you very much, Jeff. This is an exciting topic and certainly very rich with a lot of potential opportunities for us to get distracted with a lot of side components on it. So we'll try to keep it focused within the designed and built space and that area of our topic. But what we're really talking about in this area of of self-esteem, as you already kind of broke it down into broader categories of how people have a sense of confidence in who they are, confidence in their environment, that they have a sense of what is mastery, that they feel good about, that they know that they have domain expertise. And then the other part, though, is that the trickiness of human psychology is that it's not good enough that we know what we know, but we want other people to tell us that they know that we know. So we want that recognition. It isn't good enough that we just know that recognition inside ourselves. Um, so a lot of the kind of things that we look about then is, what does it mean to be recognized? How does that recognition uh, uh, get manifested? How do we feel that confidence? And is it a confidence of place? Is it a confidence of means? Is it a confidence of ends? Um, and when we talk about mastery, that it isn't maybe just a mastery of a particular domain, but it can be our mastery of our place in that domain. What do I mean by that? Is, let's say maybe, it isn't mastery of you as an athlete per se, but maybe it's mastery of a coach in the domain of athletics. So we can know that we have confidence, not necessarily because we're absolutely good at the fundamental domain itself, but we're good at some aspect thereof. So it's a rich environment for us to discuss, and I look forward to sharing that conversation with you all.
That's great. And as we were talking about some of these elements, we'll start to break down these into kind of smaller bites. And with that, we're talking about how architecture relates, how the built environment, and some of these kind of building blocks. So, Andrea, what are some of the things that, as we start to look at that built environment, what are the key elements that kind of trigger these ideas?
On a college campus specifically, we're going to look at many different types of instructional spaces to support, first and foremost, the mastery of skills in a variety of different subjects. And so we design classrooms to support active learning, where it's not just about a teacher lecturing to a student, but a student being able to be in that classroom, participate actively with engagement with their instructor, with their peers. So making sure that those classroom environments are flexible, support student interaction, and really give that student ownership of that space while still allowing the instructor to impart important information and knowledge that helps with that sort of basic level information and mastery. And then the design and development of very specific spaces that help support higher level skills, whether that's just in general higher classes, say like seminars and small group discussions that are help facilitating the mastery of discussion and higher reasoning, or maybe it's in very specific skill building for CTE programs or biology, or say we're in a welding lab where a student is learning a very specific skill, and all of the design criteria that comes along with creating those environments, especially ones that help students feel safe. And I think that goes back to Dr. Peterson's point about having confidence in an environment that you feel you come into it, you can be confident. And as you learn more of those skills, that your confidence grows. And now we're preparing students to go out into the workforce. So, first and foremost, it's looking at all those different types of spaces that we would see at the college environment that's very specific to a skill building. And then there's that broader campus, those sort of outside in between spaces that are going to help the students in all of those other areas build skills and mastery and confidence and recognition.
That's great. And you said as we talk about student experience connected to their environment, that there's a sense of ownership and kind of it's their domain and where they feel that they're a part of the whole and how it connects. And as we were talking about the student experience, Aurora, I was wondering, as we're talking about some of these effects, what are the major kind of tenets that build confidence in a student really taking ownership of these kind of environments?
I think I'm gonna just piggyback a little bit off of what Andrea said for um, when design builds confidence, our students feel safe, they feel heard, they feel appreciated when the design in a low maintenance way is built elegant, it's built to give them a sense of pride that this is built for them. When the proper lighting is there, they feel, like they can stay there for long hours in a safe environment. When it's properly cleaned by our custodial department, it gives them a sense that, they're cared after, um, and they're with us for hours. So every every intent of design, every intent of maintenance is really to give the student a sense of feeling like the classroom, the open environment, the outdoor environment is their safe haven here.
Yeah, that's a great point. And we were talking about their experience that they're seeing themselves somewhere in this space, being safe, but also that that connectedness. I think as we're talking about some of these things where we can celebrate, or maybe there's elements that along the process. Jennifer, as we're talking about even like the construction, are there specific things that relate to construction as, creating these kind of identity builders or celebrating specific events?
Absolutely, Jeff. I think in regards to the actual construction on our end to keep the students feeling safe, organized, able to study and run through their day to day, we have to be focused on keeping our construction sites clean, safe, non disruptive, excuse me, during actual physical construction. But then the celebratory part of construction is those groundbreakings where we can really celebrate what we're going to do, how we came to this moment. The passage of Measure HH made this project possible, and that really has a sense of pride. The students, the community love that. And then on the back back end, once we have completed the project, really just the ribbon cutting and the celebration behind that is a way that construction comes in and can help the students and community staff feel very excited and connected to what we're doing.
That makes great sense. And leading from there, I wanted to ask Aurora about, once the project is in place and experiencing success, what are some of the milestones like on campus that some of the staff can experience?
It literally just goes from the ribbon cutting and it just continues from there. There's so many celebrations. There's the grand opening, the ribbon cutting that you typically see, but internally we have our own in maintenance and operations, our own milestones. It's when we finally close out. Like we know we own the warranties, we know we own anything, everything behind it. So there's that major milestone that's on the maintenance and operations side. But then there's other milestones that are not as fun, but after 5 years, there's a lot of warranties that end that people don't realize, and that's a milestone for us. It really could start talking about the quality of construction, quality design, everything's holding up. When we have celebrations of a building that has been serving our students for over 10 years, and we have a 10-year celebration or a 20-year celebration. Those are milestones that not only speak to the amount of students that have been served, but also the quality of design and construction. So there's a lot of maintenance and operations milestones, and we always kind of tie them into warranties. A 20-year warranty for a roof and different things like that that we're thinking about. Our students are really the one and only customer that every day that they're in the building, they're not realizing they're actually celebrating a milestone with us because it's day to day that we maintain these buildings. So, yeah.
Just following up on what Jennifer and Aurora said, if we back up just a little bit, maybe it would be helpful to, because their points about making sure that we have a way to celebrate not only builds off of what we talked about in episode 3 about belonging and a sense of connection. But when we talk about confidence, it's also a sense of having been included and that you had a sense of ownership and involvement. And you might think, well, if the students that were around when we were doing construction, they're not the same students that are around later. But what I would suggest is that part of what we do with design is that we incorporate recognition of generations of stakeholders. We'll have donor walls, we'll have founders plaques where we recognize the board of trustees that were in place at the time. We may recognize the student trustees that were in place.
Yeah.
And so including them early on in the early celebrations and then the ongoing celebrations gives us an opportunity to again reflect that sense of you belong here and therefore you can be confident that you are thought of and you are valued. So, clearly other things that we put in place in a designed environment that reflect and help to amplify the sense of self-esteem, sense of confidence, the ability to feel like they have mastery. One is mastery of finding their way, having solid and explicit wayfinding. All of us have been, when you don't know where you're going, and you feel dumb about asking somebody, it just saps your confidence. Doesn't matter who you are,
Hmm.
so, and then the sense of place, the specific identity upon arrival, that again, that the architectural design that we might have. If you're at a very modern, forward-looking institution, having architecture that reflects that tells you right off the bat. You look at like the U.S. Air Force Academy, and you see their chapel, and it looks like a bunch of aircraft getting ready to take off and fly through the sky, type of thing. Or you have some of these places that are more about the environment, and many of them use materials that are more natural, that type of thing. Um, and to Aurora's point, that cleanliness, that tells somebody that you are important. We care enough. I mean, we've all been there in, say, a hotel room when you walked in and you kind of give it the white glove test and you're like, I guess they don't value me as a customer. And to Aurora's point, our our students are our customers, quote unquote, but so are our staff, so are the faculty. And if you know you're valued, then you start to value others around you as well. Um, and then that final thing of confidence is also if you have pride in who and what you are. Again, that if you have the emblems of who you are, if you have the colors that represent, so it reflects back on your identity that says, you know what, I'm proud to be a student at this institution that has this type of history, and I'm now the latest generation of it, and we reflect those kind of things. Um, and then finally, maybe if we talk about some of that mastery part, it's really that, to Andrea's point, that we create environments that support that type of mastery. If we ask people to do welding in a swimming pool, they're not gonna show mastery on welding, or running in a swimming pool, or that you're gonna go swimming on a track. Obviously, we create the environment and we try to remove the distractions that would take away from being able to either acquire mastery or to demonstrate it or to appreciate it. So stadiums are designed to be able to not only demonstrate it, but to participate and acknowledge it and to provide that recognition. But we also try to remove the distractions. We take away the variations of, say, wind or noise or some of these other parts. Concert halls are perfect for that. We don't have windows in those places because glass doesn't reverberate in the right kind of way, and the light changing can do things with a combination of acoustics and other type of interior lighting. So those are just examples of how we design to help to support the mastery, the acquisition of it, the demonstration of it, and the appreciation and recognition of it. And that is what the design space, I think, really reflects. And then the added sort of icing on the cake, to Jennifer's and Aurora's point, is that once we have these things built or in the process of it, we can start reinforcing these things by bringing people in to celebrate, to feel like they belong, that they are masters of the process itself and included into that whole process.
That's really well put. And as you put all these details together, you start to see that this identity is reflected in who they are based on their aspect of the environment. And being able to celebrate, they do like these checkpoints where, hey, are we on target? Is it as successful as we thought? It's almost kind of commissioning as you walk through it. And Dr. Peterson, you were talking about some of the project types. As we dig deeper into mining some of these efforts, we dig into kind of arts and athletics, even academics and housing. How does some of those aspects, what are some of the elements that are really key that we want to make sure that we include or they're being included in the design process?
That's a really good point. And, again, it goes to not only what the mastery is, but then when we talk to who the audience is. What we know is that there's different kind of masters, sometimes dependent upon, say, first year students versus third year students. Many institutions will have a requirement that first year students live in dormitories, and those dormitories are going to be designed and programmed for the needs and the greater potential needs and differing needs that first year students may have. There may be facilities that we've designed in to have upper class students be resident assistants that are mentors that help to give a greater sense of self esteem and confidence for those first year students, partly because they're with everyone else who's just as nascent into the college environment, but where maybe third and fourth year students are going to value. Privacy over space or socialization. So oftentimes you'll have smaller bedrooms, but more private, that type of element. So what we can see is that in places like student housing, we look at who the residents are going to be, and we try to make sure that we design to maximize the uplifting of a sense of confidence, a sense of self-esteem, the sense of mastery, because you want to be certainly the master of your own domain where you feel most private. So those are key things that I think, someone like Andrew probably has better thoughts than me on what the design spaces do for kind of segregating out and identifying who the user groups would actually be.
Well, so we know you guys have many performing arts projects that are currently in design or even in construction, whether they're renovations or new buildings, and that particular projects, as supported by Measure HH, really give your students a variety of ways to master skills and not just say acting skills, but learning of stagecraft or lighting design or uh, all the sort of other pieces that go along with that. And then that recognition of those skills as you invite the community in. And I think that goes back into our previous episodes that talk about social needs and belonging. And so now you're establishing community, and that community is recognizing the skills of your students, and the very specific spaces that you need to do that on a campus. Particularly performing arts is unique, right? To your point, you're not going to do that at the athletics field or in these other locations. And so finding the right place on campus and providing that very specific functionality is important to this student's sense of self-esteem, both confidence and recognition.
I think that that really builds into that identity. This is my place. This is where it could be just an exhibit like an art. That hey, that's my painting in this space, and there's a connectedness to their peers, the identity that is theirs being displayed, and they're honored. So I think that idea of customizing, and we were even talking about with athletics that this connection with, the audience, and then you're in a space where it's an arena and this is your kind of domain. I think there's a lot of great things that come into that.
I think we've seen, a lot of, say, basketball arenas, for example, where you can see all the NCAA champion,
Yeah.
things or finalists or, those kinds of things, which lets not only the athletes that are out there feel connected and feel like they have a sense of confidence from a long tradition, but then the audience as well, that they are part of a winning tradition of excellence. And, you know, it's, but part of this confidence part, I think we should never forget that it still builds, even though we're talking about this fourth level of Maslow's, that it goes back to something that Aurora mentioned in her first comments that, this thing about safety never quite goes away, that, making sure that we minimize uncertainty and fear. And I think, Aurora, you talked about things like lighting, but maybe you can share a few little more thoughts on that, because that, again, is something that without it, we're never going to
Yeah.
be able to reach that self-esteem and confidence and belonging.
I'm thinking of some of the projects that we've worked on and are working on, where what we're doing in all the hours of planning with the student, the staff, the faculty, our visitors, everyone in mind. And it's lighting, it's corners where there's no visibility. It's even the location
Mhm.
of planting and furniture that we don't have any hidden areas. Um, that's all designed with intent, right? We're making sure that everything that we do, that we're keeping our students and just anyone that's in that area is safe. It when now you were talking about the basketball game, I was thinking about the locker rooms and how it starts in the locker room, it starts in the parking lot, it starts in the showers when they're getting ready. It starts with our team making, and by our team I mean on the facility side, making sure that every area that our students touch and our visitors touch is clean. It's well maintained. The locker rooms are their prepper before they get out there. That those areas are a sense of identity. I've seen their T-shirts hung up on the walls there, a little
Yeah.
bit more intimate area, and those are their common areas. And by there I mean our students, our teams. Um, Even from the ergonomic side, we have our locker rooms that are ADA compliant. We serve a large community with different mobility limitations, and when we design with every student in mind, it makes them feel l- seen, heard, safe, welcomed. They belong. So, yeah,
And
I
I know
love that we brought up the locker
and
rooms.
when you talk about the team, your facilities team, I mean, part of what you're responsible for is things like event setup and breakdown. And again, if we don't design spaces that can support the usability of those things, um, I mean, think of the mastery or self confidence that, say, a magician would have if they have to be in a space where they don't have the mechanisms to do the magic trick because it isn't set up to have the kind of setup and so forth for that event. So we do look at those kind of components. But I would really like to hear from Jennifer, if I might, just to put it to you, Jennifer, as you look across, maybe you could share sort of all the projects that you're aware of that we're doing at Measure HH. But um, it feels like when I talk back, to Aurora's point about some of the base layers of Maslow's, um, the construction side, it feels like, how do you communicate with people too, so that they know as we go through all these things that, because how it's not just design, but that people know that you are building, to a certain code, that people can know that if an earthquake happens, they're gonna be okay. That feels like that's right in your bailiwick there.
Absolutely. There's many times that a project comes out throughout the design build process. We're working with the staff, the community, having engagements where you're communicating out the process. So let's say if it's a historical renovation, how are you going to get that up to code and meet Field Act requirements? We walk through that, make sure that the community understands. We're not just slapping paint on an old building. That this building, yes, at the time it was designed, at the time it was occupied and built, it was within the code then, and now that we're renovating it, we're bringing it up to current code today. And that story, we often share it, every time we go into buildings. Why are you doing structural renovations to this space? We've been having students and staff in here for years. Well, again, at the time it was built and designed, it was with the code standard. And now, as part of the process, we're getting it up to current code. So we have to have that conversation. You have to put that out there. We have many messaging tools that we use, whether they're infographics or, like I said, community meetings, site staff, and meetings, making sure people are hearing and understanding the current ways and or requirements we are need to meet. Schools are the second safest buildings in the state of California, right? Hospitals being number one. So it's really important and critical that we're able to share the building practices and why we're doing that. So that's a great question.
Yeah, that's awesome because the identity and connection to the community feeling safe, that this
Yeah.
is theirs, they're part of the process, and then feeling safe. As we get into the application of, kind of the architecture, we get into some of the details of, how does it connect? Is there identity or this kind of branding? Sometimes it's relating to the materials. Andrea, what are some of the detail elements as we start to look at the refinement of the architecture and how it relates to that identity?
I would actually say step back first and say, how does that building fit into the sense of place, right? Each
Mm,
campus has its own unique context. And with that context and sense of place, history, culture, that's what you want the students to take pride in. And so before we even get into the detailing of it, we want to ensure that the building honors that sense of place and builds upon that sense of place, right? So that, and I think students have a sense of pride when they go to a higher education institute that reflects or feels like a higher education institute, and that gives them a sense of like, I've accomplished something, I am accomplishing something, and then when we get into the details of it to reinforce that, one of the things we've been hearing a lot from students recently is where they can see themselves reflected in the success of others, right? So, and how we can do that in design is provide space for branding and graphics, or maybe even murals that highlight alums, from the college that say this is what they've gone on to do. And by the way, they're a lot like you, and they did these things, and they became masters and went out and got recognition, and now we're recognizing them, and you could do that too, right? And so I think it's super important that architecture as a building as a whole responds to that sense of place. It feels like it belongs. And then when we get down into the details of it, that it helps students have a sense of belonging because they can see themselves reflected in it and doing that by holding space for art and mural and graphics and really the storytelling behind it.
But
Yeah,
I
you
was
start to
talk about ideas like legacy, where you have alumni, they come back because they have these memories, these
Yeah.
rich experiences, or they want to bring their kids. Like, hey, I had this and I remember that. So this all kind of ties in into really kind of a great big picture experience.
But I love what architects and engineers and the construction industry is so good at doing often to that location and place identity is how you're able to source reflective local materials, stone or brick or various kind of elements that reflect what is local to the kind of components. So you don't have something that seems like it's so out of place because a log cabin in the middle of downtown Manhattan, not so much, just like, or having a high rise that you would find on, billionaires square at Times Square out in the middle of, someplace in Nebraska. But I've always been fascinated by how, the teams are so adroit at that. And then the construction people can take almost any of these kind of building materials and adapt to it. And again, do it in such a way that it's safe and constructive. And I know that, and maintainability, so that it's also lasting. So I've always been fascinated with that, and just my hats off to the AEC community for doing that so well.
And by using those local materials, we're having a better sustainable impact, right? Because now we're not spending all this energy on transporting materials from very far away that are inappropriate for our climate and environment. And so that then furthers, San Diego CCD's sustainability goals, right? And so all of that is working together.
Yeah. For instance, we have a standard where we try to do at least 80% native plants in all of our design because the important thing there was a time when people only focused on sustainability. So you wanted drought tolerant if you're in a dry area, that sort of thing. But we paid less attention to the fact that they were native. What we realized was that these secondary effects of where the fauna couldn't thrive, that certain types of insects. Yes, but this is not a native cactus, and so they couldn't do their home inside, the kind of plants that they used to, and then the birds didn't have them the insects that they would need to eat on. So, it's exactly that. We do try to make sure that we look at that harmony with the locality and local environment, and I would suggest that is part of that, honoring the students themselves and the place that they're in, and that it gives them, again, a greater sense of self-esteem, that they know that they are in an environment that isn't negatively impacting the broader environment that they care about.
Yeah, these are great points of like really customizing and being intentional about design and its impacts. I was wondering, I think for maybe Dr. Peterson, some of the different projects that we're planning and how they kind of relate and connect to Measure HH and some of these things as we kind of take these ideas home and how they relate and people who might be interested.
Well, what's fantastic about Measure HH is that, it is so varied because it is such a large, program, $3.5 billion worth of projects that we have, and the majority of that is already underway, because we wanna make sure that we are, maximizing the time value of money for the taxpayers and try to bring as much, to fruition in the shortest amount of time, consistent with sustainability, consistent with safety, and consistent with, safe construction. But we have, as an example, we have 4 different performing arts, projects underway. One is a historic renovation, our education cultural complex, which, built, kind of in the early '70s. That was reflecting a time and a place, in American history that focused on a lot of the civil rights movement, and we had, many iconic figures that, played historic roles in that place. And so we're choosing materials that continue to reflect the original materials and to be consistent with it rather than having sort of a Frankenstein approach of something that just doesn't fit just
Right.
because it happens to be modern. But then we also have like a straight renovation that is looking at an existing uh, facility, performing arts, that we want to just go ahead and really modernize and expand. We're not trying to change it a whole lot, and we want the look and feel to be very similar, but we just want it to be more functional and more inclusive to the community that can do things. For instance, at City College, where we are going to take the current intent and just expand it out and bring it closer to the community. But then we have a brand new construction at Miramar College in Performing Arts where they haven't had this program. But what we know is that to be meeting the demand, the growing demand that there is in the student population and families for community colleges to be a cost effective transitional path towards a 4 year institution. That if you don't have a full on program, including performing arts, including humanities, that those students are not going to be able to transfer from a 2 year program to a 4 year. So having this brand new capability is absolutely crucial to the program and to the confidence and self-esteem that students are going to have. I'm going to a 2 year that is going to really prepare me well to any 4 year that I will have the opportunity to go to. And then at our Mesa College, we are renovating not just the performing arts, but we're actually combining it with some of our other facilities, our administrative buildings. We can do some innovative things with space utilization such that we can bring these disparate functions together in a harmonious way, but that meets all the needs. So to me, it's just fascinating that we're able to have such a variety of facilities, including athletic complexes, including science buildings, where we're looking at how we can showcase, recognize, reinforce the kind of mastery, competence, and the ability for us to be able to recognize that through so many mechanisms that we design into these spaces.
This has been a great conversation. I can tell the passion that all of you have for the student experience and the difference it's going to make. And I mean, some of the closing ideas, this idea of mastery. What are students kind of taking away? So, Dr. Peterson, I know you talked a lot about this. What's their takeaway in this idea of mastery?
My biggest takeaway is that my sense is that our students, once they graduate, whether it's from a degree program or whether it's a certificate or a career or technical one, they come away knowing that they have met a standard. And I can just see when I attend our graduations the sense of confidence versus when you go in the fall when you have a lot of first year students starting and you can see the trepidation on people's faces. And that transformation, we had a past board of trustees who always called the spring time when graduation was coming smile season, and you can just see it. And that's just absolutely fulfilling. You can see and feel that sense of mastery and sense of self-esteem and confidence.
This is great. I really appreciate everybody being here for this event. This is a great discussion as we're talking about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So, in our next session, we're going to be talking about self-actualization needs, potential growth experience. And so, this is at the highest level for Maslow, representing the realization of one's full potential, their personal growth, and peak experiences. So, excited about our next conversation that we're going to have. And I just wanted to thank everyone for joining us. And yeah, this all leads to student success. Thanks for joining us. And remember, student success is built by design. Thanks for joining our podcast, Student Success Built by Design. This series is brought to you by the San Diego Community College District and its Measure HH Bond program, whose goal is to further its education and student success mission. We'll see you next time. Measure HH is a $3.5 billion voter-approved capital improvement bond program at the San Diego Community College District, transforming its 10 campuses, which are housed in 4 separate colleges that collectively enroll 90,000 students annually. Measure HH will impact nearly 1 million students in its first 10 years.